Have you here? It's going to be a while before we have another live event because we're going to have some Zooms coming up. And so a couple things. Uta Wagner has been so kind to bring this wonderful article with photographs of the Cosimo party that we had last fall. And there's some beautiful color folders, and this is from the California Stadtzeitung, the German language newspaper for the Bay Area. So I'll put it over here. Please leave it so that Uta can recapture it before she leaves. On behalf of the JCCSF, I wanted to announce that they are going to be presenting on April 16th here in the JCC an opera by Emerson McAllister called Another Sunrise. It's a one-act opera that will be performed by soprano Emerson McAllister to commemorate Yom HaShoah. The subject of the opera is a Polish resistance fighter who went undercover and worked for the Nazis in a prison camp during the war. And it's a story about regret and her own experiences and the fact that she went undercover and lived when other people didn't live to see another sunrise. It was written by Jake Hagee. It will be performed here, one performance only. So I have some flyers over there if you're interested in going and seeing it. It's pretty riveting. I have seen it. I saw it in Moulin Creek, and Marie Plett took the leading role. She's a good friend of ours. It will be in their theater downstairs. They have a theater downstairs and all the way at the end of the building there. Okay? Let me see. Upcoming programs. If anybody wants to come up here and do this, fine. Okay, our upcoming programs. On Saturday, April 8th, we'll have a Zoom. We'll be with Ranyar Condit and other members of the West Bay Opera team, and they'll talk about the upcoming production of Flying Dutchman down in Palo Alto. The performances will be conducted by Jose Luis Moscovich, and the production sets are by Peter Crompton, costumes by Callie Floor, and lighting by Stephen Mansart. The Dutchman performances are Friday, May 25th, Sunday, May 28th, Saturday, June 3rd, and Sunday, June 4th. So that should be of interest. They always do a really good job, even though it's a pint-sized opera house. They really do a fine job there. Okay, that's April 28th via Zoom. On May 28th, pardon me. Let's see, April. Okay, we're in April. April via Zoom, author Larry Wolf will be with us. This was arranged by our speaker today, Jeff McMillan. He's a Silver Professor of History at NYU, co-director of NYU Florence, and is the author of The Shadow of the Empress, Fairy Tale Opera, and the End of the Habsburg Empire, Monarchy, rather. And it's due to be published later this spring. Now, of course, you all probably know that San Francisco Opera will be performing the rarely performed opera, Die Frau des Schatten. So you might want to see this. It's a very interesting story, and the music is just spectacular. So then jumping forward to May, in coordination with the performances of Flying Dutchman in Palo Alto, the Wagner Society is going to hold Richard Wagner's birthday party in Palo Alto. We have a small gathering place in Palo Alto in the downtown area, and on Ramona Street, for those of you who live in Palo Alto, in the heart of downtown. So we'll be serving snacks, birthday cakes, and assorted beverages. It's not a sit-down dinner. It's just a post-opera mixer/social event, and hopefully we will be able to have some of the cast with us at that. Registration will be required because there's a limit to the size and the number of people we can have there, and also because we're having to haul in refreshments, we want to make sure that we will be able to provide hospitality for everyone who comes. So that is going to be on May 28th, immediately following the Flying Dutch performance there. So if you want to make a pair of that, see the opera, and then go to the party, that was our intent. Okay, then the next one will be another Zoom. And hold on to your hat, Stefan. Clay Hilly, the Helden tenor, will be coming to us via Zoom. He lives now in Europe. I believe he and his wife live in Berlin. He will discuss his career, which exploded 2 years ago after many years as a cover artist for Helden tenor roles all over the place. He burst onto the stage at the Deutsche Oper Berlin as Siegfried, and when the scheduled tenor had to cancel. And Hilly has now gone on to great success as a Helden tenor in many opera houses all over the continent. He's doing a lot of concert work, too, here in the United States. So you want to see him. Now, he was a cover in San Francisco for a lot of years, and I believe it was a cover for the Ring here, but never went on. So we get to have him here with us via Zoom, and he is really an entertaining gentleman. So I did also want to introduce our special guest that we have today. This is interesting because for years on the board of the Wagner Society, it's been my desire to make a connection with the folks over at the Opera Center and see if we could start recruiting Bayreuth stipendiaten from the Merolini and the Adler Fellows. And this year I struck the mother lode, and I had a wonderful candidate referred to us, and he's here today. It's Yang Lin, who is in the Adler Fellowship Program, and he's a pianist. And come on up.
I feel like extremely lucky to be here today, and as you know, I'm first-year Adler Fellow pianist at San Francisco Opera Center. I'm originally from Shanghai, China, and my first, actually also this is my last green cycle experience was back in 2010 in my hometown, Shanghai. And Opera Cologne, they brought their...
We don't have a microphone.
Opera Cologne, they brought their whole production to Shanghai back in 2010, and they brought like their whole crew, 200 people, including full orchestra members and all people, including firefighters. So I've been extremely lucky to watch that production, and I just talked to Steve, and I heard because the renovation going on in Opera Cologne, so they never get to perform that production again. So I still remember Greer Greensley was full-time at the time. So that 4 nights really changed my life. And then I came to the States. I went to schools in Boston and CCM, and finally I'm here. I feel extremely lucky. I got connected with Terry in January, so I will have this great opportunity to be in Bayreuth this summer. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to make a presentation to you. This is a book from my book collection, which I'm currently deaccessioning because there's shelves of books that I have read, and then books I haven't read, and I'm going rid of a lot of books that I haven't read. So this is a full German and English text of the entire Ring with a fold-out. This is really a cool book. I love it. I think you will. With music for all of the leitmotifs in the operas out there. And I thought maybe you might like it because you can tickle the piano keys and with ease. So there you are. Thank you very much. We're really happy that he's here. He might have to duck out early because he's also accompanying the Bohème out of the box, so he has to be in Palo Alto today for that. So go ahead and have a seat. Thank you, Jan. It's really wonderful. Oh, well, wherever it is. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Okay, I'm sorry. It's in Los Gatos, everybody. Forgive me for making a boo-boo. Okay, so with that, one more thing about that Shanghai Ring. There was an American lady that went there, and she's very, very old. And she said she got followed around by the press because they couldn't believe there was this little old lady that came all the way from the United States to Shanghai to see the Ring, and she'd be walking around the streets. People would point at her and say, And that was our wonderful former president, the late Verna Perino. And she was on the news, she was in the newspapers, and she said she felt like a superstar because the paparazzi were following her all over. So anyway, that's a little connection, another connection to Shanghai with us. So I went through the upcoming programs, and so now I'm going to introduce our guest today. Our guest today is Wagner Society board member Jeff McMillan. And Jeff McMillan received his master's degree from the Jazz and History Research Program at Rutgers University in Newark, New Jersey in 2000. He went on to work at the Metropolitan Opera in New York City as an archivist with the late Robert Tuggle, who was a legend. I knew him from back listserv opera.l a long time ago. He's really a wonderful, generous person, a fount of knowledge, and sadly missed, I'm sure. The Met's Digital Archive chronicles the long and storied history of the Metropolitan Opera back to 1883. Jeff McMillan is currently Public Relations Director for San Francisco Opera, as it says right here. He has written for Opera News, Musical America, and San Francisco Classical Voice. Also an author, Jeff McMillan's book, Delightfully, is the first biography to seriously examine the jazz musician and trumpet genius Lee Morgan. And I took some time to listen to Delightfully, the album, and some of his other work, and my God, the guy was a genius. He was epic. Morgan's vast contribution to jazz came from his work as a performer with Dizzy Gillespie, there's another one, and as a composer. Thanks to exclusive access to Lee Morgan's now deceased brother, McMillan was also able to provide unparalleled insight into Morgan's personal and family life. So please, if you would, let's welcome Jeff McMillan.
Thank you, Terry. We can talk about Wagner, or we can talk about Lee Morgan. I don't have slides for Lee. I just wanted to mention one thing about one of the announcements.
Cell phones are out. Off. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention about one of the upcoming shows meetings that Terry mentioned. On April 29th, Larry Wolf is going to be giving the Frauen Zoom talk for the Society. And I highly recommend everybody tune into that because Larry just this week gave a great talk for all of us at San Francisco Opera talking about this piece, which there isn't a lot of institutional memory left that knows this piece from last time we did it. It's been a long time.
How do we access it?
It'll be a Zoom.
But
and Larry will,
It'll be a Zoom.
yeah, but will we be notified of
Terry will.
Terry?
It's the next.
Have I ever not notified you on Zoom?
Yeah.
Anybody?
Yeah.
I will notify you in advance. It's in April.
I have my April calendar up, but thank
Okay,
you.
see me after the meeting.
Okay, Terry.
So that's just a little plug for Larry's talk. I think Larry's brilliant. He has this new book coming out, and he is so close to this piece because he's from Vienna and his grandparents were subjects of the Habsburg monarchy. So don't miss it. But today, Wagner Out West. At San Francisco Opera, we are in the midst of our 100th season this year, our centennial, which is a rare milestone reached only by 3 opera companies, including us. We know, my bio gave away one of them.
Chicago?
No.
The Metropolitan Opera is number 1 because they're in the midst of their 137th season. The only other one is the Cincinnati Opera, which is a little surprising, I think, but when you think about the fact that Cincinnati Opera is a festival opera, they occupy a very different kind of role in the opera ecosystem because they have the opportunity for artists to work during the summer. So those who don't go to Bayreuth, who don't sing in Salzburg, they always had a place to sing in the United States from 1920 up to now in Cincinnati. But hats off to them. It's a tough field, opera, and it's gotten very competitive, the festival business. So, that's still here, Cincinnati's still here, and San Francisco Opera is still here at 100 years, which is pretty amazing. Chicago didn't make it, of course. They didn't make it through the Depression. And Philly's always kind of up and down with crews like Boston. Like Cincinnati, San Francisco Opera, at least at the beginning of its time, had built-in advantages. Our seasons began in September and October. Slide this, see, 3. In the old days, opera seasons in the Met and in Chicago always started in November. So we had this advantage at San Francisco Opera starting in September. So artists who came over from Europe could get a couple of weeks of work in before they would go on to their longer term engagements further east. But they had to be willing to come all the way to California. It was not new feat these days. The company was also founded on a history of opera patronage in this area, nearly 7 decades worth of bustling operatic activity, actually. Touring companies stretching back all the way to the 1850s fed what amounted to local fanaticism for the lyric art here. San Francisco has always been an opera town. Keep improvising, so I'm getting lost in my place here. I don't want to leave out some of this information. I think it's pretty interesting. So along with that long tradition of opera and great precedents, there was a taste that was cultivated in this area for opera. And just as New York was showcasing great talents or Philadelphia was introducing new works, the impresarios here in San Francisco felt the pressure to create something that was equally attractive and compelling for those people on the East Coast to read about it in newspapers and wish they could get to California somehow and figure out, what they're doing out there. But back to the beginnings. San Francisco sits on one of the world's greatest natural bays, and therefore has been inhabited by human beings for millennia. Colonization efforts by the Spanish, French, and English began in the 16th century, and then with brutal decisiveness by the Americans in the 1840s. California and its natural port became part of the Union in 1846, but the area's population began to expand, or make that explode, a few decades later, or a few years later, rather, due to one pivotal discovery. On January 24, 1848, James Marshall noticed some shiny flecks of gold in the American River at Sutter's Mill. 180 years before the advent of social media, news of gold went viral. People got on boats and came all the way to California to hear about this. Before the year was out, the population of San Francisco grew from roughly 1,000 people in 1848 to 25,000 in December 1849. And gold prospectors from almost every corner of the globe continued to rush in. Most didn't strike it rich, I think we all know that. But those who kind of supported the gold miners, like the transportation, the bakers, the people who made work clothing, they were the ones who made the real fortunes. But so too did some of the entertainers. And with all these Europeans kind of rushing into this area, the demand for opera took root because they needed some diversion, some entertainment. The ostentatious display of wealth, which is long a pastime associated with opera, is certainly a driving factor for its success at the beginning. But it's also important to point out that the lyric stage and operatic singing were the acme of artistic attainment at this period in the 19th century. Some of the world's greatest celebrities and public figures were those who could float a pianissimo B flat on the opera stage. court or an aristocrat or a leader of the country. The opera stars were right up there at the top. Just a few months after the discovery of gold in California, Richard Wagner began working on the idea for what would eventually become his Ring of the Nibelung cycle, with a prologue about a magical gold stolen from nature. Was Wagner's magnum opus, in fact, inspired by what was going on in far-off California? Perhaps. Right? It's the same year, and everybody was talking about it. But you shall see, the influence was a two-way street between Wagner and West and Wagner. But in the early days of opera in this town, Bellini and Verdi were the kings of the stage. Wagner's works were similarly imported like those scores were, but first in concerts during the 1860s, and then in fully staged productions beginning in the 1870s. The first of Wagner's stage works on the West Coast was Tannhäuser. It was presented here in April 1876 at the California Theater in San Francisco. Tannhäuser was also the first of Wagner's works to be performed in the United States, premiering at the Academy of Music in New York in 1859. 2 years before the composer had reworked Tannhäuser for the audience in Paris and had one of the most humiliating setbacks of his career. And it's not clear when we read about this production in San Francisco whether we heard anything that resembled the Paris version. Probably a little bit of, we don't know, but it was probably a bowdlerized version, probably heavily cut, very short compared to what we're used to now with that opera, and it was sung in Italian. Sorry. Yep. The presenting company of that Tannhäuser was headed by soprano Inez Fabri. Despite her Italian-sounding name, Fabri was actually born in Vienna as Agnes Schmidt. She performed around Europe and toured South America before coming to the U.S. She made her way west and eventually set up shop in San Francisco, where she became something of an operatic institution here. She gave recitals. She became kind of grand dame of the city, where she would host court in her living room. People wanted to come talk to her about her journeys and travels. She also headlined her own opera company. And Tannhäuser was probably the final production of that company. I haven't been able to find another one, but it seems like in 1876, this is what broke her company, presenting Wagner. And there were actually advertisements for her to give her production in Los Angeles after the performances here, and those were canceled because the company just was insolvent at that point. Trip. So dangers of opera and Wagner together, having to go out on the road. Fabri died in San Francisco in 1909. She was a distinguished survivor of the 1906 earthquake, and her papers and diaries reside at UC Berkeley in their special collections of the library. Anyone interested in following up about her story. A few months after the first dose of staged Wagner in California, a world away in Germany, one of the great musical happenings of the age happened at Bayreuth, which I think we all know was the world premiere of the Ring cycle. Though it would take 15 years for any part of the Ring to be performed here in California, Wagner's stage works were already beginning to gain a foothold here. So if we look to November 1876 in Philadelphia, there's a production of Die Fliegende Holländer by a company headed by this person, Eugenie Pappenheim, was a soprano, obviously there she is as Brunhilde. But her company gave the American premiere of The Flying Dutchman. All the Pappenheim Company's presentations in that season in Philadelphia were given in Italian, so the soloist, chorus, and orchestra of only 30 musicians gave opera's the American premiere of this piece as Il Vassallo Fantasma. For comparison, San Francisco Opera's production in 2013 had 68 instrumentalists in the pit and 7 backstage, where the strings alone were 45 strong, which is kind of dwarfing the entire orchestral assemblage for this 1876 show. But despite the kind of Wagner-light aspect of this, the reviews for the 1876 Philly Dutchman reveal a fascination with Wagner and a bit of confusion. The Philadelphia Inquirer offered an astute observation about the tenor, really like this. The tenor singing Eric said, Signor Bacci is a tenor robusti, with just the declamatory style which Wagner's music seems to require, and lungs that appear inexhaustible, which is pretty similar to what I think we expect from tenors who sing that part today. So they were really listening. Pappenheim received the lion's share of the praise for these performances. The Inquirer went on about her. This lady possesses a voice of ascending vigor and volume, and after the duo which closes the second act, the applause was spontaneous from all parts of the house. Even the musicians in the orchestra dropped their music to applaud. Pickup chorus, on the other hand, for the Flying Dutchman, had some trouble with Wagner's rhythms. Remember, this is brand new music for these people. They were experienced musicians, but this was tough. The Inquirer was pretty succinct about their performance, while other papers go on and on about it. They said, quote, the sailor's chorus was decidedly too much for the male chorus, and it did not go well. Days after the premiere, a company headed by American prima donna Clara Louise Kellogg presented the Flying Dutchman in Boston. And like everything in their repertory, it was performed in English as the Flying Dutchman. Some early ads for Kellogg's undertaking hailed it as the American premiere of this opera. So either she or they weren't aware of what was going on in Philadelphia with the Pappenheim Company, or they were just ignoring that to try to boost their own box office sales. Could be either way. Kellogg is one of America's great kind of homegrown operatic talents of the 19th century. When you look at her achievements during the American Civil War all the way up into the 1880s, it's very impressive. She was a coloratura soprano. She specialized in roles like Elvira in I Bertani, and Marie in The Daughter of the Regiment, Marguerite in Faust. It was probably Carmen, which she was most famous for. And that's at a time when Carmen was brand new in the repertory. It was still kind of a shocking type of piece that was a novelty. And that's her in her Carmen costume. So Senta might seem like kind of an odd fit for an artist like this. But in her 1913 memoir, she described how she handled the moment between Senta and the Dutchman. And it's clear that there's something about this piece that really kind of activated a new artistic ear for her. She said, the first time I sang Senta, it seemed impossible to hold pause until those 18 bars were over. I've got to hold it. I've got to hold it, I kept telling myself, tightening every muscle as if I were actually pulling on a wire stretched between myself and the audience. I almost auto-hypnotized myself, which probably helped me to understand Norwegian girls' auto-hypnotism. An inspiration led me to grasp the back of a tall Dutch chair on the stage. That chair helped me greatly, and as it turned out, I held the audience quite as firmly as I held that chair. Kellogg took the Dutchman premiere on the road and went to Detroit, Chicago, and in May 1877 came all the way here to San Francisco. So she wasn't with the company at that point. She had kind of parted ways, but she had caused the spark, and Dutchman came here. It was part of a season that included operas by Balfe, Albert, Von Flatow, and also Verdi's Il Trovatore. Balfe and Albert had both died a few years earlier, but their operas were still pretty popular. Von Flatow pretty much had his say as a composer. His opera Marco was still very popular. But Trovatore was different. It was by a living composer who was still very, very active, of course, in 1877. And this opera was incredibly popular in San Francisco. There's this great 19 years before this. I just wanted to mention to give an idea of Trovatore in San Francisco and the kind of case for this piece. There was an estimated 20,000 tickets sold during one summer in 1858 to just that opera. And that at a time when the city population was 55,000 people. So that's 37% of every single person in the city of San Francisco saw Trovatore that summer. And that, I mean, maybe there were some people who went multiple times. It is opera. Opera fans do that. But it's pretty impressive. Dutchman, which was also part of the season, slightly older than Trovatore, but of course brand new. Nobody knew it in this area. And it also represented a very different direction in music. Its reception was quite mixed in San Francisco. The performers were praised, but San Francisco's critical establishment kind of went to town on it. This quote is too much. This is from the San Francisco Examiner. It said, "He that hath ears, let him hear," is a scriptural injunction. If the said ears had borne 2 or 3 hours infliction, the sheep iron and sheepskin so-called music of Richard Wagner, it is doubtful if he would ever have, again, perfect use of his auricular organs. The bard of Bayreuth styles his productions the music of the future. If that is to be the fearful doom of posterity, how much is it to be regretted that its author flourished so far in advance of its true era, and thus the present generation would have been spared torturing the affliction of being inveigled into listening into such crashes of corrugated discordance. The future is welcome to all of Wagner's musical legacies.
He has to name the author.
It's unsigned. As it often were at that time, I think authors maybe on the last day, but I don't know. One thing I would point out, though, this is just one graph. The author goes on and on about this. I mean, you have column inches to fill and have a strong opinion and reaction. Yeah.
Where was the opera held before our current opera? Where was the venue?
So this was at the California Theater, which is kind of where the Jewish community or Jewish museum is over by Yerba Buena, kind of in that part of town. There were several opera houses in San Francisco. This one was there. Just as Clara Louise Kellogg's production of The Dutchman was sailing into port here in San Francisco, that other Wagnerian trailblazer that I mentioned earlier, Eugenie Pappenheim, was starring as Brunhilde in the country's first ever performances of Die Walküre at New York's Academy of Music. So productions of Wagner and interest in his music were really proliferating at this time on both coasts. By the summer of 1877, word had spread that Richard Wagner was himself coming to America, and anxious to capitalize on the publicity surrounding his Spring Festival at Bayreuth, the composer was obviously looking toward the New World as maybe a fertile ground for his revolutionary ideas. Also, a chance to raise some money. So he had a whole stack of invoices, which he always seemed to be owing money or fleeing creditors. So he's looking at an opportunity to raise some money. Though the American visit of Richard Wagner never materialized, of course. But the Petaluma Courier, I love this, bless them. They informed their readers that summer that as soon as Herr Wagner's concert tour visit to Petaluma was announced, the Courier readers would be the first to know.
What a letdown.
5 years after San Francisco's Flying Dutchman, Eugenie Pappenheim came to town with her own company. This would be the city and state's first dose of a first-rate distinguished Wagnerian singer. In addition to being the nation's first Senta, the Austrian soprano was also, as I just said, the first Brunhilde in New York, and also the first Irina in Brienz. She didn't sing any of these parts in San Francisco, but she did star as Elsa in Lohengrin, along with the prima donna assignments in Der Freischütz, La Jouée, and Les Huguenots. And all this in just 2 weeks, with multiple performances of each. She was a workhorse with this company. The first fully staged ring opera in San Francisco was, of course, Die Walküre. The traveling Emma Youth Opera Company presented the work at the Grand Opera House in January 1891 as the main event of a 2-week-long stand. The headlining diva was only 30 years old at this time, but already kind of a road veteran. And she was showcased as Carmen, Marguerite, Elizabeth and Tannhäuser, Elsa and Lohengrin, and finally as the Linda. The Brunhilde was another Viennese singer, like Pappenheim, Georgine von Januszewski. Now let's just pause for a moment and consider who it was that brought Wagner into the American West. In almost every case, it was an enterprising woman who not only starred in the performances, but shouldered the burden of running large-scale touring opera companies during the rough and tumble late 19th century. Inez Fabry, Eugenie Pappenheim, Clara Louise Kellogg, and the Duke, though not held up as national heroes today, they are giants in our American musical history. They were entrepreneurs who in today's parlance built a brand. Each of them assembled their own company, acquired scores and sheet music. They booked performance venues, they rehearsed singers, they hired orchestras and choruses locally. There wasn't much of a chance to really rehearse these productions that they were giving with their full forces, so they would kind of expect the best and drill as much as they could, and then hope for the best on opening night. These sopranos were business leaders, and they were responsible for the payroll of their company members. And goodness knows, they, I'm sure, had to deal with lots of petty jealousies and kind of backstage dramatics that are endemic in all performing arts companies. That's just a truth that goes all the way back. But in spite of all of this, they found the time to study new music and motivated to present new operas rather than just being into old crap. And they were competitive. Out on the road, they jousted with each other. They were competing for audiences in some of the main cities, giving simultaneous seasons like here in San Francisco. So if anyone is looking for an idea for the next great Netflix series, I have a suggestion. The female road warriors of the 1870s operatic world. And if we have any producers in the room, I really love this stuff. Throughout the 1890s, the music of Wagner established a foundation in San Francisco thanks to overall fascination with the composer's work and periodic visits of performers who were even greater Wagnerian credentials than Emma Duke or Eugenie Pappenheim. In 1896, soprano Amelie Materna, Vienna's famed prima donna, and also the artist that Wagner himself had chosen to sing Brunhilde, the first ring cycle. She also created Kundry. She gave all Wagner recitals here in San Francisco, along with this German tenor Anton Schott. He could be the subject of another Netflix series we can talk about later. San Francisco's first full production of the ring cycle came in 1900, presented by the touring Metropolitan Opera at the Grand Opera House, which again was over by the Yerba Buena area, just south of Mission Street. Ring tickets ranged from $2 to $7 each for each of the four operas. So you could spend $28 to see the whole cycle. So not exactly a Reader's Digest version of the ring. All of the operas were cut drastically in that 1900 ring cycle. There was a lot of role doubling. San Francisco heard three different Wotans, and when each of them wasn't singing the King of the Gods, they were singing another role in the cycle, either Alberich or Hagen. Set and costume designs for the Met production were based on the original 1876 designs for Bayreuth. The Brunhilde for that cycle was not a shared assignment. All three operas that Brunhilde's in were sung by this lady, Lilian Nordica. She was the Met's prima donna at the time and one of the great Wagnerians of the day. She was the first American to sing at Bayreuth in 1894 in Lohengrin. The SF Call had a really great line in their review for Nordica. They said, Nordica was gloriously equal to the vocal demands and has the Wagner spirit and letter to the law to the last measure. Wow, she must have really knocked them on their heels. Met tours also brought well-cast performances of Lohengrin, Tannhäuser, and the local premieres of Tristan and Isolde and Parsifal. After the Met tour of 1900, decades would elapse before the ring was staged again in San Francisco. Occasionally, the music from the four operas would be performed in concerts by the San Francisco Symphony. Conducted by Alfred Hertz, who was, of course, a great Wagner conductor when he was at the Met before he moved to San Francisco to retire, but then he ended up becoming the music director of the Symphony here, worked for another 25 years. And here his soloist is Marguerite Matzenauer. So in the piece of It's a Small World, Marguerite Matzenauer was actually one of the star pupils of Georgine von Chanischowski, who was our first Brunhilde in San Francisco. But let's get back to San Francisco Opera, where I spent a lot of time. Our founder, that's him on the left, Gaetano Merola, led a majority of performances for his company in the first 25 years, beginning in 1923. And he had a penchant for the Italian rep. Most of our early seasons, you see a lot of Verdi, a lot of Puccini, Giordano, Donizetti, and also he really had a soft spot for Massey's now. Became our kind of go-to opera for opening night in our early days. But even as at the very beginning of San Francisco Opera's time, in 1923, some of the journalists and some people were pestering Merola and asking him, well, when are we going to hear some Wagner? Which is kind of weird to think that, this brand new company that he was trying out and trying to find if there would be support for a resident company here, a place that was used to great opera for decades, but they were all these touring companies. He wanted to form something that was based here and hired artists who were going to be here presenting opera. And they're already hitting him with stuff about, let's hear some Wagner. So his very first kind of trial season at the Stanford Bowl of 1922, they were saying, this place is great for Carmen and Faust and Pagliacci and what you're doing, but we also also be a great setting for a ring cycle. So, I say, slow your roll, San Francisco Wagnerians. That's like an all-in company ask, and San Francisco Opera was not ready yet. Those calls for Wagner besieged Merola for years, and as music director of an affiliate company in Los Angeles at the same time, was also hearing it from the public there. So for San Francisco Opera's first 4 seasons, Merola evaded the recurrent calls for Wagner, claiming he wanted to wait until the company was successful enough to present Wagner in such a way that did credit to the institution and to the city of San Francisco. By 1926, Merola was actually turning a profit with his opera company. That season, the company earned $168,000, while paying $166,000 in expenses. Now, after only a few seasons of capital investment, costumes, and sets, that's $2,000 in the bank, which in 1926 is a lot of money. So it was time, and Merola stepped up to the plate and announced that 1927 would be the company's first presentation of a Wagner opera. Does anyone know which one it was? Our first one was Tristan. Long, huge orchestra, kind of complicated with changing these sets. And it also requires 2 specialist artists, which are not going to be doing Romeo and the Duke of Mantua. You need something special for this opera. So it was a big job. Merola's head of production at the time and the stage director for most of our performances for the first 50 years, Armando Agnini, immediately began forming a dream team for the scenic side of this Tristan. The company hired Fritz Kranicki, a German set painter who had recently come to the United States to work in Hollywood. He was working on this film, I don't know if anyone knows it, Ernst Lubitsch, the Student Prince in Old Heidelberg. Keep needing to watch it. It's on YouTube. See it? Apparently, Kranicki worked on one of the big scenes that harkens back to Europe. But beyond the film work, his operatic credentials were beyond reproach. He was the head scenic artist at the Berlin State Opera, and during the 1920s, and also painted sets for Cologne, Hanover, and most significantly for the Bayreuth Festival. His participation in San Francisco's first foray into Wagner brought authority and a link to the German traditions. And Tristan was an opera that Merola knew was pretty far outside of his wheelhouse. And so he yielded the baton to Albert Hertz, the music director of the symphony, and the first performance was set for the second night of the season. And to unambiguously announce that this was going to be different from what people had been getting used to with San Francisco Opera, Hertz had a little notice in the newspaper on Tristan Day, encouraging audience members to be there early and in their seats by 7:45 p.m. because once the lights dimmed, they would not be admitted. Gustav Mahler. The announced cast would feature the experienced Elsa Olsen as Isolde, and the matinee idol Rudolf Laubenthal as Tristan. Laubenthal was a mainstay at the Metropolitan Opera at this time. He was also a Helden tenor in Weimar, Germany, and also sang in London. He was steadily adding the big Wagner roles to his repertory at this time. He made his role debut as Tristan in January 1926 at the Met, singing 4 performances, one of which had a certain Neapolitan conductor from San Francisco in the audience. The New York critics cavilled a bit about Laubenthal's assumption of this role, but most agreed he was highly credible. And I like this one from Musical America. They said, Laubenthal's Tristan was physically personable, sturdy, if not always chivalric of bearing, and its dramatic and vocal aspects of accompaniments had caused fewer regrets than other Tristans of recent memory. I don't know if that's praise or not. You're better than what we've heard. And they finish with, his voice was of good meat, and he sang rather than shouted. That's important. And at the time, the papers assured audiences that Alston and Laubenthal were the world's greatest possible duo for Tristan, and who would deny it in 1927? This was, of course, the Lawrence Melchior, Kirsten Flagstad period. There were a lot more people who were kind of aspiring to sing these roles. It wasn't obvious who's the best. That Tristan was great success, but considering the majority of the company's presentations at that time, it was a one-off special event. Merola would not return to Wagner in 1928 or 1929. The second ring in San Francisco occurred in 1930 when a touring company, a German opera company, not San Francisco Opera, they presented full cycles here. And this lady, Johanna Gatsky, was at the center of that company. And it was just a bunch of experienced Wagnerians, all of them Germans. Some of them had sung at the Net like she had before the war. Her touring company barnstormed around the country from 1928 to 1931, presenting full ring cycles in many cities where the cycle had never been presented before. And all this, mind you, during the Great Depression, and with a prima donna who was nearing 60 years of age. She was singing all three Brunhildes and every once in a while throwing in an Isolde each week for months on end. So, another incredible Wagnerian workhorse. She was scheduled to return to the U.S. in late 1932 for yet another tour, but Gatsky tragically died in a car accident in Berlin, and her company immediately disintegrated. So let's add Johanna Gatsky to our Netflix series, I think. But along with this group of singers and their companies that they ran for the series, let's not leave out Gaetano Merola. At the same time that Gatsky was staging the ring, Merola's company was building from strength to strength. In 1930, we see the company beginning to lean into repertory expansion with Richard Strauss's Salome, huge coup for Merola at the time. We can talk more about that if you're interested. The U.S. premiere of Ravel's L'Enfant et le Sortilège, and the company premiere of Tannhäuser. The floodgates were opened, and the following year of 1931 sees Lohengrin, Meistersinger, and Tannhäuser on the prospectus. In 1932, the first year in the new War Memorial Opera House, of course, we opened with Tosca, followed by Lucia, but on that same season we had Lohengrin and Meistersinger. Then, 1933, Tristan comes back with Gertrude Kappel and a young Lawrence Melchior. I want to just point out these photos, they're quite good from our archives. This is that first group for Lohengrin. This is Friedrich Schor, very famous singer at the time, Maria Miller, well-known Bayreuth soloist. There's Muller and Friedrich Schor in the Meistersinger group, with Merola right here, peeking over their shoulders. And this is a group of choristers from Tannhäuser in 1931. I love this picture. It's kind of hard to see this, but the most animals that we probably ever had on stage. You have all these like Irish setters, a couple of real falcons, and all these horses in the back.
Oh, no.
Oh, so they went for it with that show. All that is a prelude to 1935, one of the great watershed moments in San Francisco Opera's history. That's when we gave the ring for the first time. We opened the season with the ring. So you can imagine Opera Ball not being Das Rheingold. That's what happened. And it was just an amazing turning point for this company, leveling up to becoming an internationally renowned presenter. And then, of course, the next year after that, there's Flagstad and Melchior. That's a photo from our stage 1936. Very famous photo written in Time magazine. Kind of just, you lose track of how many times you see this photo, old accounts, but it was taken right here. And as we enter San Francisco Opera's second century, our music director, Sun Kim, has announced that she will conduct at least one Verdi and one Wagner opera every season. Every season, one of each, at least. And she'll do other things as well. So stay tuned. Wagner Out West is a story that is still developing. And it's something that began in the 1870s, so all the way up till now. And we, as members of the Wagner Society of Northern California, take an active part in that. I'd like to think that those people in the 1920s who were pestering Merola and trying to say, when are we going to hear some Wagner, are us. So keep up the good work with that, and let's continue building upon the legacy of the last 100 years. So that's what I'd like to say. I'm going to take a drink, but do we have any questions?
Yeah. Do we have any idea of what size theaters they were doing those performances in the 1870s, 1880s? You know, when they're doing so many performances, were they in large theaters like we're accustomed to now, or much smaller?
Smaller, yeah. We definitely know. I can't say how big the California theater is. I wish I knew the answer to that. I haven't looked into it. But I think it's safe to say fewer than 2,000 seats. Whereas, you know, when the Met opened in New York, it was the largest opera house in the world with 3,800. And the War Memorial, when it opened, I think it was 3,100 or 3,300 in the 1970s. We lose some seats. Carl Burnham came to conduct the opera. So, quite a bit smaller than the War Memorial, a lot smaller than the old Met or the current Met. Probably more akin to First, which is, well, that's 800 seats. So, yeah, that's somewhere between, a little more than that, a little bigger than that.
I was just going to say, Wagner Out West, I had no idea I would come out of this being so impressed by these remarkable women. Thank you. I mean, all of those, not until, later on did any of them sound familiar to me. Not only being opera singers, but as you were saying, producers.
It's really cool.
That's a story that needs to be told.
I mean, it sounds so cinematic.
Yeah.
Sound on the road, this kind of work. And I think when we look at, Johanna Gotsky's death, I mean, her company folded immediately. So it's not like she had Team Gotsky doing all of her social media and all of her stuff, keeping things going while she was just a figurehead. It's not the case with any of these. They're actually in the trenches doing all that work. And singing. And studying the new operas. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
I was surprised with first of all, it's good to hear that we're going to get a Wagner every year. Okay. Yeah, that's very good. But I was surprised with the season coming up with the new Lohengrin, that when we did it the last time, it was like 9-10 years ago, that was a new production then, and I think it was ours, and I was surprised to see us, even though it's a borrow, that we didn't do. Was there a reason why we didn't do the other? Was that one not even ours?
It wasn't ours.
Oh, it wasn't ours. I thought it was.
Yeah. I think Ken's the director, who's the director of our incoming production of the Surplus. But yeah, that was just done one time.
Okay.
Yeah. So this one, that was a rental. This one, we're getting from the Royal Opera.
Right. Do you know where that one came from? The one 10 years ago?
I don't.
I thought that because I went and looked at the, online at the archives, you can see the program thing, and I don't think it said that it was like somebody else's. That's why I assumed that it was ours.
It should say on further down when you get below the cast. where all the choristers and
Yeah.
singers, there's usually a note there that says, this was
I'll have to go back and look.
created for music opera. Yeah, I'm sorry I don't remember.
You don't? You don't remember?
He's very handsome. Our former music director, Nicola Camilla Nyland, made her debut in that show.
Who?
Yes.
She's going to become Camilla Nyland. And she's coming back for the first time since doing that for Found the Shot in Los Angeles. So a little threat that long of her to 20.
Yeah, I got a letter from the director of the Bayreuth Archive, Sven Friedrich, and there's a whole tranche of Wagner correspondence, which is unpublished.
Oh, yes.
And the publisher has reneged on the contract to publish them for whatever reason. I mean, it's available to scholars who get access to them. They can go in and see them, but they have to look at them and can't make copies and so on. And so it was really interesting when you mentioned, what about Wagner's correspondence? Maybe that's some of the stuff that's his late correspondence.
It certainly will be.
Yeah.
Because I think that letters project only went up to 1972 or something. It's like all of the letters he wrote. Right?
His late letters. Yeah.
So all the late stuff, which would include his planning to come to America, would be in that
So
area.
there's
a treasure trove.
There's an outcry amongst scholars to try and lobby to get the publisher to go ahead with the work. So and I just got this petition from Sven, who came and spoke at the Wagner Society way back when. I think we were across the street at that time. Yeah, and he's really, really working hard to get maybe possibly get some funding for us to get that out there.
Is that project in parallel in English and German? Just worthy project though. Gosh, I can't imagine all those letters from Petaluma writing. Maestro, please come. We've got a hall for you. Everything's set.
I'm curious, how did opera directors in those times know about up-and-coming singers and how operas were being received by audiences in Europe and New York? They didn't have, did they have booking agents in those days, these singers, or were they?
That's an interesting question. I think a lot of reputations were built through the press, for sure. And there were a lot of correspondents for American newspapers that went to Europe routinely as part of
To cover the operas and
cover the arts. And they would just report back, Amelie Materna is the thing in Vienna. And then when she comes, I think the people in California were kind of primed. They already knew that name and the Wagner Association that she had accomplished. So by the time she got here, there was a clamor to see her. I prepared to talk about Parsifal. She was the first Gundry, and there were these great reports of the first time she sailed into New York Harbor because people met her at the docks. She couldn't speak English, and they were all out there just, waving out a flag. They were just so excited that this big star, her from Vienna, was coming to New York for the first time. And it's just odd. All those people thought nobody had heard her say. They just couldn't wait to hear her sing. So her reputation kind of preceded her. But booking agents, I'm not sure. A lot of it has to do with conductors and music directors at the time. They would take the summers off. While Cincinnati's presenting their show during the summer, a lot of conductors are going to Europe to listen to singers and audition and contract talent for their seasons. That's definitely what Merola did. We would open in September, play through maybe early or late October or so, and then he would go to Europe. Definitely New York on the way there. And he had good contacts. He would hear a lot of opera and artists that he liked and who were available and interested in making this huge trip. He had a different kind of ask than most of his artists because coming all the way to California that must have sounded like. I mean, it's just a huge time commitment to sail across and then get on a train and do another 5 days.
Well, there wasn't even a train until the 1870s.
Oh, yeah.
Right? There was no transcontinental railroad, so you were going via Panama.
It could take a long time and all sorts of things could go wrong.
Wagon train.
Yeah.
Get on a wagon train. Pony Express. Yes.
You said there were a number of opera houses in San Francisco at the time.
Mhm.
So were they all doing the classics that we know, or were they doing operetta? What was, you know, what they were producing?
Good question. We do have some kind of performance acts from that period, so you can kind of see what different companies were doing. It's interesting. There's a lot of the same. So Trovatore, Hernani, Rigoletto, some of these pieces that were kind of recent Verdi hits were getting done in all the houses. There's just a real hunger to hear more Verdi work. And also Bellini and like I said, Albert, I think he's an Irish composer, Albert. And so there were some other kind of top 10, top 20 opera composers at that time that were all kind of in circulation, very similar to how we do it now.
Is there any record of subtitles and the use of them that we have now in early opera?
There was a business of providing libretti for opera patrons. And publishers would just create them and sell them on the curb or inside the lobby, so people could read the text as it was going on. And this is the case all the way up until 1981 or so, when Francesca Zambello kind of introduced the super titles, that people would get these libretti and kind of do their homework and know what the opera was about. Some would be following along while it was going on, but usually they just probably read the synopsis. The synopsis was also always printed in the newspaper the day before, so this was a way to prepare people for what they were going to hear. Kind of a great model. We don't do that anymore. You can get a review and maybe a preview piece in the newspaper, but the kind of coverage they got for opera in the early 20th century.
Do you know when that stopped, Jeff? When they stopped publishing libretti in newspapers?
Libretti, I think in Net Gift Shop, you can still buy libretti.
No, in newspapers.
Shows.
When they stopped being
In the newspaper?
in the newspapers, the synopsis, I mean.
That is in the 60s. I don't know exactly, but that's kind of when the kind of mass TVs coming in, radio, newspapers, so the media landscape really changes a lot in the 60s. I bet it's probably around there. Because I'm thinking of Harold Schomburg's reviews for the New York Times. He didn't ever carry synopses. That's in the 70s, so I think it's before that.
Yeah, I need to ask a question about Kirsten Flagstead.
Yeah.
Now, for a long time, she was a persona non grata here in the state. Then did she ever get back into the good graces? Because I guess it was the involvement with her husband and the World War II and Nazis. So what do you know about that?
Yeah, Kirsten Flagstead, I could talk a lot about her. My mentor at Met was Bob Tuttle, as Terry mentioned. She introduced me. Bob was writing a book about Kirsten Flagstead after he died. And Bob, if you had 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 hours, he would tell you the story of Kirsten Flagstead and how she was pilloried for no good reason over her affiliation with the war. Her husband was an industrialist in Norway, which was obviously occupied by the Nazis, and he had contracts with the military. So it didn't look good. She was totally non-political. So when she went home to Norway, the optics were terrible. And then the war ended when she came back, and a few kind of orchestrated campaigns to slander her, to make it difficult for her, really were effective in that. And really kind of earned her love for Norway in the United States. San Francisco was very friendly with some board members of San Francisco Opera Vespers. She always stayed with them. So she always looked forward to coming out here. And San Francisco Opera, as the first company, really stood behind her and kept her contract since 1949. And the War Memorial trustees said, we don't want her here. She's a collaboration problem, a PR disaster. We can't have her. But Merola said, if we don't have her, we're canceling our whole season. So we were the first to really do that. And then after that, she went back to the Met, of course, for a couple more years. So it was never the same for her in the States after that.
Similar to the same we have now with artists, with Russian artists.
Oh, that's happening too, yeah.
Yeah.
Some have no issue or they're just not thinking about it. They're just pursuing their lives and careers. Others do. They do have an affiliation.
Yeah.
Or start not to. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I love talking about this stuff.
When did Helen Travel come in? She became very famous on that.
Oh yeah. So Helen Travel, she comes in after Flagstad. Leaves to go back to Norway during the war, and she's an American, and she has this humongous voice, and kind of inexhaustible endurance for the big Wagner parts. She just kind of steps right into what Flagstad had been doing. They're very different. You hear the two. You hear Flagstad's recordings, and you hear Travel. They're very different. I can see how people would like one or prefer one over the other. But yeah, she was an American and stepped right in. Her career kind of comes to an end around 1950s on opera stages, I think, 1950, because she was so popular and she was kind of a ham on stage. I guess she had kind of a entertainer personality. She was doing almost like stand-up comedy and fun concerts, and the Met didn't like that.
She was kind of a big jazz music too. I know Rudolph Bates came down on her. And,
that's right. The other one, along with those two, of course, is Astrid Varna.
Oh, yeah.
She's just another one of that trilogy of amazing singers from the 1940s through 1950s that were singing these roles on their pieces. And all through all of it, Maurice Melchior wrapping up performances. That career will never, ever be duplicated.
Okay, so what's your inside knowledge of when a ring is going to return? Nothing you have to
either confirm or deny.
What's your PR statement on that?
Well, Unsung Kim has announced her plan to bring Wagner in and pair the in every season, and the ring's part of that. Yeah, for sure. Just going to work to it. We have some other pieces that haven't been on our stage for quite a while. I think Parsifal. It's not been on our stage for very, very long time. We did the Dutchman in 2012, I think, 12 or 13, that new production appeared previously, and that had taken a long time before that, for instance. So there's a lot of ground covered. Tristan. So it's great. I think it's some of the most welcome news of these pieces are coming back. And see what options are in if they're the last one we did, which was
Strauss
30 years ago. Right? We're like just around a shot. We couldn't revive that whole production. It was just falling apart. And it wouldn't have been safe. So we could get a new show. We have the Dave Hockney production. We might do that for Parsifal. Those shows are newer. So stay tuned. I don't have a date.
Well, I remember the first time I ever heard Parsifal, it was years ago. Oscar Varna sang the part of Kundry. She's marvelous.
We did it several times when I worked for the Met, and I got kind of used to it. We always kind of did it in April around Easter time, which is like this old tradition really clever. What is the one thing Bayreuth has exclusive thing on Wagnerian world's history? It's basketball. They could never present it on Good Friday. Because the festival is not until August. So the Mets stepped right into that thing and they rode that horse for 100 years. Good for them. Right. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much, Jeff. That was really great, and I really appreciate it very much. It's kind of interesting that all these old sourdoughs and all these miners and so on love their opera. And they came from all over. They also came, from South America where there was mining, and Mexico where there was mining going on. We kind of learned a little bit of that with the girls in the Golden West, the mining history here. So, our next program will be on Zoom. So, and you'll be getting information. I will email it out as I always do. And we have taped this program, and if it's successful and everything, Stefan back there, he does the editing, he sends me a file, and hopefully it took. We never know. Electrons can be finicky. So with that, unless anybody else has any other comments or interjections, this meeting is adjourned. Until next time. Thank you.